Would I ever move back to the UK for good and leave Colombia? Well, whenever I mention a downside about living in Medellín, Colombia, or something negative, or kind of a side that people don't usually see, I get people in the comments saying, okay, move back to the UK, you're obviously unhappy in Colombia, da da da. So before I get into it, I am super happy in Colombia. I kind of knew beforehand that I'd really enjoy living here in Medellín, Colombia in general, but actually it surpassed my expectations and it's a little bit better than I thought it would be. The weather, my Spanish adventure, how everything's different. Even the grass is different here compared to the UK. The warm nature of Paisa people, the buildings, making new friends, keeping in touch with old friends back in the UK. Because funny enough, and kind of almost ironically, I actually keep in touch with friends and family more now that I've moved 5,500 miles away compared to what I did before. So to cut a long story short, I love living in Colombia, in Medellín, and I couldn't think of honestly a better place for me to set up shop. But basically, to answer the question, things would have to get really, really good over in the UK for me to consider moving back there, and subsequently things would have to get really, really bad here in Colombia for me to feel like this is no longer the place for me. So just going on the first point, the whole situation in the UK would need to do a 360-degree turn for me to consider it as a good place to set up shop for the future. So taxes would have to come down massively, obviously not going to happen. All the problems around immigration, social things, that would have to get reversed, which it doesn't look like it's going to anytime soon. The public services would need to get better, probably not going to happen. The weather would need to get significantly better, especially in winter. In the summer and spring it can be okay, but winter and autumn is awful. Obviously that's not going to change. So for me personally, I don't really see a scenario where things in the UK would get significantly better in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. Because if you look back at it at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, things were way better back in the day. And just the whole kind of value prospect of living in the UK is so far out of whack at the moment that yeah, it would need to just do a massive 360-degree turn. And so we'd need to do a 180-degree turn, not a 365-degree turn, for it to get back to a level where the kind of the cost and the value of being in the UK is kind of worth what you pay in terms of taxes, the weather, all of that good stuff. And so yeah, I personally don't see the UK doing that kind of turnaround. And so for me personally, living in Colombia, I just wouldn't see that as a viable option. Now, the flip side of that coin is that things would need to get significantly bad in Colombia for me to consider moving. Obviously, I bought my property here, I'm putting down some roots, I'm making friends. Every month that goes by, this kind of feels more like my home, if you like. But for example, off the top of my head, if the safety and security situation got really, really bad, you know, you had a significant uptick in crime, organized crime, you know, maybe foreigners not being safe, maybe locals not being safe either, you know, gunfights in the street, all of that stuff, that would make me seriously consider leaving Colombia. Also, if the economy just absolutely collapsed, I'm not sure, I'm not an economist, I'm not sure about the intricate details of the Colombian economy, I'm only looking at it from my perspective, but if things got really bad here, economically speaking, then the whole economy collapsed. I'm lucky I have an online business, and so it wouldn't affect me as much as locals do, but that would also be a consideration. I guess also social unrest, political unrest, that kind of ties in with the whole crime thing. If those things got really bad, I would seriously consider leaving Colombia. Now, the other question is, would I automatically go back to the UK? Not necessarily. If Colombia started to get really bad for all the reasons I just mentioned, and also the UK got really bad for all those same reasons I mentioned, then I would probably pick another country, maybe in Latin America, to move to, because I'll still be able to practice my Spanish unless I went to Brazil, which maybe I wouldn't. But then again, you know, if Colombia would experience a lot of social, political unrest, then maybe other countries in Latin America would do. Who knows? Some of you Latinos watching this would have a way better understanding of that than me, so maybe you can just drop a comment below and let me know that if Colombia were to go downhill, would that mean other countries in Latin America would go downhill? Now, I think quite interestingly, some of you watching this might agree with me and think, well, yeah, Colombia has gone down in the last 5 years. It has gone down in the last years. Compared to 20 years ago, Medellín isn't the city as it was. And that might partly be true. Someone actually commented the other day on my videos on this, but I would say that's the same for London as well. This is a bit of a crazy thing to say, but I think with a lot of countries in a lot of cities, you know, that late 90s, early noughties period was probably the golden age for kind of our 21st century civilization, and things in some sense have gone downhill since then. But you have to pick a place to live. You have to choose a country to live. If everywhere was better 20 years ago, then you have to pick the country that's kind of close to where it used to be, if that makes sense. But generally speaking, I am super happy living in Colombia, in Medellín specifically, and I'm really happy with my choice. Now, I know a lot of expats, because I see them out and about relatively regularly, really like having that fluidity. They're here for 3 months or they're here for 6 months and they go somewhere else and they kind of hop from country to country as they go along. That's fine. I actually enjoy doing that as well, but not forever. I personally like having a base. I like having my own property. Living in Airbnbs is cool for a while, but when you realize basically you're living in someone else's apartment, you're kind of living this month-to-month lifestyle. Yes, you don't have to worry about utilities. Yes, APME are not going to cut off your water, so you have to go to the toilet in the gym and shower at the gym for 24 hours. Yes, you don't have to deal with all of that hassle, but at the end of the day, someone can just kick you out at a moment's notice. You're living in someone else's property, someone else's sofa, someone else's bed. You have no stuff, and so if you really kind of want to make somewhere your own and kind of feel like a country is your home, you're not going to get that with that Airbnb kind of expat lifestyle. And for me personally, I like to kind of put down roots so I know where I am. I can kind of make things homely, and I basically have a base from which I can, do my stuff. I have my routine, I can do my business, I can travel, all of that stuff. And so for me, things in Colombia would have to get really bad in order for me to consider living. If there's a little uptick in crime, it's probably okay. If the economy doesn't do well this year or next year, probably okay. If there's some stuff going around on the election this year, it's not the end of the world for me. So since me buying my property here and kind of making this my kind of permanent home, if you like, in the future, things would have to get really bad for me to consider leaving. And if I was going to go back home, back to the UK, things would have to get drastically different there, which I just don't really see happening. There's no scenario where the government in the UK would suddenly be like, okay, cool, top rate of income tax is only 30%, we're going to cut this, cut that, instead of getting your marginal rate of tax being, 47%, they massively whack that down to like 32%. Suddenly, you can get an appointment on the NHS, you don't need private healthcare, the tube runs well, the buses are running really well, the streets are really clean, the weather's great like it is here, it's kind of sunny all the time, you can just live in shorts, it's all good. The general mindset in the UK around like wealth and being successful, as I'm sure you guys know if you're from the UK, if you visited the UK, we have a culture of kind of, you call it tall poppy syndrome, of like poo-pooing on people who are successful. Like if you see a Ferrari driving past, you're like, oh, what an asshole, don't like that guy, rather than, oh wow, that person may have started a business from scratch, created value, employed a lot of people, good for him, he deserves all his success, that kind of stuff. And so all of that stuff is so ingrained in the culture that it's not going to change overnight. It's not even going to change in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. So for me, unless that changes, which highly likelihood it wasn't, the UK for me is just not a viable option to kind of set up shop and live, which is a shame really, because I am British and deep down I love my country. But yeah, those are the reasons I would not be in any rush to move back to the UK unless things in Colombia got really, really bad. And even then I would probably just choose another country in Latin America to live rather than going back to the UK. So I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.